how to estimate how long your hard money loan term should be for. All right, guys, when we're talking about term, we're talking about time periods. When we talk about term, this is going to be number of months, right? So what's the term of the loan? 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, 3 months. When anybody says term, they're basically saying, how long is it for? You could also answer that question, say it's a 30-year term. When you're dealing with a loan that's from a conventional bank and you ask them what the term is, they're going to say 30 years. So that's basically the length of the loan. So that's how long the term of the loan is. Now, the question that we're asking here is, how do you know what to expect? Okay. There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. First thing is the rehab time frame. Now, in that rehab time frame, you're going to have issues potentially with permits and how long permits are going to take. Number two, you're going to have the days on market. And then number three, you're going to have the time that it takes to close and resell, which is typically about 30 days. So let's talk about each one of these in detail. So the rehab. The easy thing is how long it will take you. It's going to take you $1,000 a day to get the rehab done. So that means if it's a $50,000 remodel, you should plan on 50 days. We add to that 10 days for permits and everything else like that. However, there are some places like Chicago where the permits take over a month to get. Most places it's going to be a few days. Some places it's going to be a few months. So what you're going to want to make sure you know is when you're talking to your contractor, asking them, how long will it take until we can get a permit in hand? Because if it's going to take more than 5 or 6 days, maybe up to 10, you're going to want to extend that period, because we do $1,000 a day. That's how long we plan, plus we add 10 days, so then 60 days. If this is a $50,000 remodel and I'm in a place where it's not going to take me months to get a permit, I'm going to plan on 60 days in this scenario, okay? Then I'm going to look at days on market. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look and say, okay, what is our days on market? Let's just take Atlanta, Georgia, because it was the first one to come up. What I can do is come up here and I can look at average days on market depending upon the number of bedrooms. So if my house is a 4-bedroom, I need to plan on 102 days on market, okay? That's what I'm looking at here, is how many days they're going to be on market based upon the number of bedrooms that I have. Now that's Atlanta, Georgia as a whole, gives us a really good idea of what's happening there, tells you what's happening with inventory and everything else. But if we look at the last 90 days, average days on market is 194 days, okay? For a 5-bedroom house, it's 135 days over the last 90 days. And a 3-bedroom average time on market is 86 days. So let's say we have a 4-bedroom house, 102 days is what we're looking at on the market. So I'm going to add that to the 60 days that we're already been talking about. So this is days on market, DOM. And then I'm looking at additional 30 days once I'm under contract to give me a little bit of buffer room. So if I'm adding those together with my handy dandy calculator, pretty simple math here, but I've got 60 days for construction and permits, longer if it takes longer than a week to get permits where you're located. And you're going to have to ask your contractor, what is the current time? That changes based upon demand, time of year, those types of things. Then we're going to add to that the days on market, which is 102 days on market. And then we're going to add to that 30 days for buffer and closing. We're going to divide that by 30, and that's going to be 6.4 months. So if I was in this situation, I would be asking for a 7th-month loan, or I'd be asking for a 5-month loan and then make some payments. Like in our scenario, I'd be like, hey, let's get a 5-month no payment loan, and then I'll make 2 payments, potentially payment 1 and payment 2 after that. But with a 5-month loan, with what we do, we roll that cost in, so you're not having to deal with that with the payments. So that's another way of doing that. But this is the simple way of knowing. How long will your rehab take? $1,000 a day plus 10 days. as long as your permits aren't extended periods of time. Ask the contractor. Days on market, I go and I look and say, what's the average days on market for the number of bedrooms that I'm having? And I add that, and I add 30 days. So in just a few seconds, I can find out how long I need to realistically sell this property and have a successful experience. In this case, I'm going to plan on about 7 months is the term I'm going to want to be going for. Now, just a side note on all this, if there are things with the property you're concerned about, that should be taken care of. That should be taken care of before you actually purchase the property. What I mean by that is if there's structural engineer concerns, or if there's concerns with plumbing or electrical, all that type of stuff is supposed to get checked out, reviewed before your due diligence deadline. So you should know ahead of time what the scope is going to be in this rehab with very few surprises. The only surprises that you're going to come into are things that you can't see. Now, the number one thing people talk about not being able to see is actually the septic or sewer system, the sewer line, which you actually can see. Now they can put cameras down there and you can actually look at that. Whether it's worth the cost to do that or not, they last quite a while, but when they go, they're expensive to fix. So that's something, or something you're going to find behind the walls, because part of what you can't do in that inspection is rip out the walls just to see what's behind there. So, but that should be a very limited scope of things that you're finding that weren't part of your bid that becomes a surprise. But the majority of the time you should know what that is, and any concerns, inspections, all need to be done prior to your due diligence deadline so you know what to expect before you close, so that you can plan accordingly to get the correct term that you need to be successful.